So hey, this is a response to Bruce the Monk in one of the comments on one of my videos, and just gonna get to it. So Bruce, thanks for taking the time to comment at length, I guess. It is upsetting that you didn't take any of the arguments in the videos seriously, and I suggest trying out the hypothesis that I actually believe in what I'm saying, that the arguments actually do matter, because they do. That would save us a tremendous amount of time. If you don't understand my arguments, you could at least ask some questions about them or try to find some common ground. That'd probably work out better. If I'd watched 3 of your videos and couldn't find a single part of a single argument to at all relate to, and instead turned to make accusations about your motives for making them, what would you think of me? Are you really telling me you have nothing to say on the who created God argument? And you can't possibly empathize with why that question matters to people? I mean, there's an amazing lack of interpretive charity here that be nice if you would address. It appears you've skipped the debate part, and have settled on the premature value judgment that I'm just an uppity sinner who needs to be quiet and take the Missouri Synod Lutheran Jesus' moral authority for granted. Just blow off every other version of divine authority with your human wisdom, please, but don't use that wisdom on my God. Are you really going to ignore that billions of actual humans take a variety of different divine authorities deeply seriously? Just telling everyone not to think too hard about Christianity while freely attempting to discredit any other theistic belief system with your human wisdom seems plainly unfair, obviously. The very mental act of formulating counter-arguments to those other theistic religions makes you, by definition, insubordinate to those gods. It doesn't matter what the thoughts are. I mean, atheists offer all sorts of a range of thoughts from, shallow to, really thought out, heavy contemplative thoughts, and they get told the exact same thing. You're not allowed. So, I mean, you freely blow off entire competing worldviews in barely half a breath, as though one can't do the same with Christianity. Perfect gods only make perfect creations that can't become imperfect. All of Abrahamic religion is done after that point. If all we had of the first few hundred years of Mormonism were pro-Mormon documents, would you even take the mundane claims for granted, much less the extraordinary ones? A compelling case for the New Testament falls similarly. For sure, the New Testament makes more extraordinary claims, yet is in a deeper, more unverifiable historical context, nullifying that. The Old Testament ups the extraordinary even more, and is even less verifiable, because it's just deep in history. Ancient religions getting away with saying whatever they want is not at all compelling to a reasonable person. That is, of course, if we're ignoring all of the obvious conflicts with modern science, that, creationism and flood geology, and the fact that the Bible describes an ancient false cosmology with, flat Earth and hard dome sky and stuff like that. So, atheists freely point out tons of satanic verses and contradictions in the Bible, but you tell them they're not allowed to use their reason against Yahweh. Well, Muslims have no problem telling you the same thing about Allah, and will make their own defenses regarding supposed evil verses. It's just a plain double standard on your part and theirs. It doesn't matter how bad the evidence is if at the end of the day you're just allowing your religion to pull rank on critical thinking. You like picking apart liberal Jesus? Cool. Liberal Jesus is an obvious farce. I agree. I have no problem doing that for conservative Jesus too, since he's an obvious supervillain. Threatening to come back with an army of angels to terrorize and torture the vast majority of humanity for all eternity is what comic book supervillains do. So if I'm allowed to use my human wisdom on liberal Jesus and on Allah and Vishnu and any other god, Jupiter, whatever god, Odin, whatever gods, I think I could do that with Jesus. And to just say, and just to pull rank on that, it's like, I'm sorry, why would I listen? Why would anybody listen? It's stupid. So, I mean, is there a really good reason to murder gay people or to set most everyone on fire for all eternity for the crime of not living by the fine details of Leviticus? Or are these things just plain and obvious horrors we should reject as coming from any legitimate moral authority? And of course we go through the standard Christian apologetic tropes. You say, one places one's own reason as God, which is as original as the fall of Satan. It is a two-step way of saying the same old, I am God, and no amount of syllables changes that. Well, it's a little dramatic. Doing the best we can with what we appear to have to work with in terms of humanistic philosophy is just all we can do. It's not a claim of alternative omniscience. And so when a toddler becomes an orphan, they do indeed move up in natural rank as the supreme authority, short of having any new caretakers or adoptive options, but they're still stuck with their toddler brains, for better or worse. I mean, appeal to motive is a lost cause here. Humans are often full of conflicting motives. As it turns out, I crave genuinely superior moral authority that I can actually trust. I would greatly emotionally benefit from that being the case. I mean, as far as human wisdom goes, I have little choice but to be the highest ranking moral authority in my world. But I'm still just that toddler, so. I mean, I agree that most people are shallow, and discerning their motivational states most often accounts for the veneer of rationality. Modern psychology largely supports that picture. We feel first and think second, if at all. I don't take that as a license to continue on emotional autopilot. It's a call towards appropriate levels of discipline in critical thinking and emotional adjustment. We do also reason, and we do also change our minds even when we don't want to. C.S. Lewis was infamously dragged kicking and screaming into Christianity via rational argument. And even though I think his arguments are incredibly weak, I still believe him that he was persuaded. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, people respond differently at different times in their lives, and honestly so, from their perspective to the same information. I'm assuming that you're familiar with what kind of person I happen to be, at least I would think, of all people. I was incredulous with Lutheranism up front as a teenager. I mean, it sounded like a contrived values tale, and that's what I believe now. And yet I still listened to young earth creationists and was convinced biblical Christianity was true. And despite that, I was still open-minded. I'd surfed through various Protestant and non-denominational denominations in college and didn't find any of them particularly better or worse than Lutheranism, aside from Lutherans tending to have more of an academic bend. But I was still open to the claims of Eastern Orthodox Christianity, despite my long-held Protestant prejudices that wanted to lump them in with Catholicism. I still listened. I didn't stop there. I realized that the negative cases Eastern Orthodoxy and Protestantism launched at each other were both way better than any of their positive claims for themselves. Like, they took each other down. And so I was willing to reassess. I needed the grounding. I was even willing to reconclude that some version of Christianity might be true if it could be justified with more adult and impartial sensibilities. I still wanted it to be true, but I had very little to work with. However, when I started unprivileging Christian assumptions and made them compete against alternative explanations, it all fell apart quite easily. Did it have to if God is so obviously real? Probably not. I mean, I think Trump is an absolute abomination and greatly wish he didn't exist. But there's still plenty of evidence he's real. You know, just to invent a Trumpism, which could. I was even fine with being an agnostic and freely disagreed with popular atheist sentiments and only gave ground with actual argument, line item by line item. I still do that. You will not likely find a single other atheist admitting that they are making an ontological argument for metaphysical naturalism. Do you really think I wouldn't change my mind again with a good argument? Really? Okay. Last week, I went back and forth on an atheist's Facebook wall with a Christian who was being a bully to virtually every commenter in the thread. We're talking a couple dozen threads and hundreds of comments, tons of people. And I carefully took him to task over all of his claims and spent over 10,000 words attempting to show him his errors. I stuck to substance, and he still leveled endless biblically inspired ad hominem in my direction. He couldn't be bothered to even attempt to argue his way out of a basic, I'm going to mispronounce this, Euthyphro dilemma, much less even acknowledge he had one, and continued to harass numerous atheists who were blowing him off for shilling for Jesus.